first video in our Tactical Elements series. I'm Joe and Andrea, and today we'll be looking at what chess tactics are and why they're such an important part of becoming a better chess player. Now, the idea of improving as a chess player is a bit of a mystery to most people. Many believe that what makes the best chess players so good are things like memory, intelligence, or the ability to see farther ahead than anyone else. Occasionally I get asked how many moves ahead I can see in a chess game, and my joking answer is to say that I can see 10 moves ahead, but those never seem to be the moves that get played in the game. The real point is that it's too easy to miss a subtle point about the position right in front of you, and if you do, trying to see any further ahead is useless. Even great chess players often have no idea what their opponent's next move will be, and so they have to rely on other abilities that don't involve seeing ahead. So what kind of abilities are these? Well, in popular culture, chess is often referred to as a game of strategy, so maybe it's finely honed strategic skills. This is getting us a bit closer to the mark, but it's still too simplistic. To most people, the word strategy is almost interchangeable with the word tactics, but to a chess player there's an important distinction. Strategy is about grand scale plans encompassing most or all of the game, while tactics are the nuts and bolts methods for achieving short-term goals. It's the same distinction made between tactics and strategy when leading armies on the battlefield. The great figures of military history, such as Alexander the Great or Napoleon Bonaparte, are often described as masters of military strategy, but they couldn't hope for any of their grand plans to succeed if they weren't also masters of military tactics. Ultimately, it was the tactical outflanking and other battlefield maneuvers that had to carry the day. Likewise, on the chessboard, even the best strategy will fall apart if most of the pieces needed to carry it out have been captured, or if you're suddenly checkmated because of an overlooked threat. Chess players may debate the relative importance of tactics versus strategy, but strategy depends upon tactics, and so if you want to become a better chess strategist, it begins with mastering chess tactics. The path to victory in chess usually involves building up an advantage over your opponent until checkmate becomes inevitable. There are many kinds of advantages you can build up, but the most reliable and the most obvious is to capture more of their pieces than they can capture from you. When you accomplish this, you're said to have won material, and therefore you have a material advantage. Most chess tactics, therefore, are carried out with one of two things in mind: winning material or checkmating the opponent's king. Now, we'll be looking at checkmates in future videos, but for now you might also be interested in our mini course on checkmating called Mortal Blow, an introduction to the art and science of checkmate, available at our website. For now, what I'd like to focus on is winning material. The approach most players begin to use shortly after learning to play involves making simple threats. Attack the other guy's rook, and if they don't notice, you can grab it next turn. Or put them in check, and maybe, just maybe, they won't be able to get out of it. This has an obvious limitation in that it depends as much on luck and your opponent's oversight as on your own skills. Good players don't rely on just stumbling into victory like this. To become a better player, you need the ability to impose your will on the chessboard, and this is where chess tactics come in. Now, I said earlier that winning material is about capturing more of your opponent's pieces than they capture of yours, but this isn't exactly true. As anyone knows, some pieces are worth more than others, sometimes a lot more. A more exact definition of what winning material means is capturing opponents' pieces that have a greater total value than the pieces they can capture from you. To really know if you're ahead, you have to know what all the pieces are worth. So as our first step to understanding tactics, let's look at this. Now, there are 6 different kinds of pieces on the board, and as everyone knows, the least valuable is the pawn. Pawns are an important part of the game, of course, but that's mostly because there are so many of them, and partly because of their potential to promote to more powerful piece. Their plodding step-by-step movement, and the fact that they're the only piece on the board that can't move backwards means each individual pawn is worth a fraction of what any other piece is worth. The value of a single pawn is used as a standard unit that we can use to measure the value of all the other pieces, and so each pawn is given a value of 1. A knight is generally considered to be worth 3 pawns. They can get around the board much more quickly and move in more directions than pawns, and knights have the unique ability to jump directly to a square without their path being blocked by other pieces. The crazy sidestep motion often leads to attacks that catch players by surprise. A bishop is considered equal in value to the knight at 3 pawns. Unlike the knight, they have the potential to move and make attacks across the entire length of the board, but they can't go through other pieces the way a knight can. A subtler point is that because bishops move along diagonals only, each bishop is permanently confined to squares of only one color. Each player starts the game with 2 bishops, one on a light square and one on a dark square. Losing one or the other means a player has a permanent weakness when it comes to that color of square, and so even though material may be even, it's considered an advantage to have both bishops on the board while the opponent has, say, a bishop and a knight. This advantage itself, called having the bishop pair, is usually considered to be worth about half a pawn. With their identical values, the knights and bishops together are referred to as the minor pieces. A rook is worth about the same as 5 pawns. Like a bishop, it can move any number of squares so long as its path isn't blocked, but because it moves along ranks and files instead of diagonals, it isn't confined the way a bishop is to squares of only one color. This is the chief reason it's worth so much more than a bishop. With this extra value, the rook is one of the major pieces. With the combined powers of both rook and bishop, the queen is of course the most powerful piece on the board, and it's valued somewhere between 9 and 10 pawns depending on who you're listening to. 9.5 is probably a reasonable value. Because it's worth so much, however, the queen should be used with care. The king can't really be given a value because, of course, if your king goes down, you've lost the game no matter how much material you have on the board. Any amount of material you give up in order to checkmate your opponent's king is worth it. This doesn't mean the king is helpless, however. It's worth remembering that, strictly as a fighting piece, the king's value is equal to about 4 pawns. In endgame situations where the most immediate threats have been taken from the board, the game is often decided by which player can get their king into the action first. Having a sense of what the pieces are worth is important. Without it, you won't know if a particular exchange of pieces is good for you or something to avoid. This is only the beginning, however, because things aren't usually this obvious. We need to develop a bag of tricks that enables us to force these situations out into the open. The tricks themselves are rather simple, but they form the elements that make up the most complex tactical situations seen in games between top-level players. Helping you learn these elements is what this series is all about, and they'll form the fundamental building blocks you'll continue to use for as long as you play chess, even if you go on to become a grandmaster. Now in our next video, we'll be taking a deeper look at the terms and concepts we'll be using throughout the rest of the series, and that you'll keep on using as long as you continue to develop as a chess player. I hope you'll join me again. For chessphere.com, I'm Joe and Andrea.